The federal government is launching a new digital charter to protect, they say, Canadians' personal data. Ottawa is promising changes to federal privacy laws to give Canadians more control over their personal information when it's collected by technology companies. The government laid out a series of principles today they say will guide changes to the Privacy Act. The changes will also include penalties and fines for tech and social media companies that breach the new privacy law. So does that mean the government will start fining Facebook right away? When can Canadians expect these new protections to kick in? Navdeep Bains is the Minister for Innovation, Science and Economic Development. He joins me now from Toronto. Hi, Minister. Great to see you. Thanks for your time.
Glad to be back on the show, Bashi.
So, Minister Bains, many of the changes that you announced within the digital charter would require that privacy laws be overhauled. There's just over a month left in the sitting, then an election. Are you going to introduce any new legislation on this before then?
Well, that's the game plan. The idea was to make sure that any changes that we're proposing will resemble a legislative agenda. Obviously, for this term, and we want to convince Canadians going to the election as well that we want to earn their trust for another mandate to put forward these changes to really, again, build trust in this digital economy and really help individuals succeed online and also provide predictability for businesses as well.
So you are going to introduce legislation when you come back in the 5 weeks that are left?
Well, it all depends on the legislative agenda. As you know, we have a lot of items in very few weeks. Our goal is to continue to advance some of these issues that we've raised, particularly around overhauling some of the changes around the privacy legislation. So we'll see if there's opportunities now or going forward as well in the next mandate.
I understand what you're saying. I just want to be clear, though, for our viewers, because there is 5 weeks left. Like you said, there is a lot already that your government has introduced that is being debated either before the Senate or still before the House. I'm not an expert on process, but it looks to me like it would be very difficult to introduce, even think about passing new laws. So I just want to be clear.
So you're correct. It's going to be very difficult to pass any legislation at this point. What we've done is proposed policies and changes to the privacy legislation that we'd like to implement in a timely manner. Clearly, there's very limited runway in the legislative agenda for this session. So the hope is to putting it in our platform and also in the next mandate as well, if we're fortunate enough to earn the trust of Canadians.
Those new rules, new privacy rules, whenever they come in, will they apply to political parties as well as companies like Facebook, like Google, the ones that you talked about today?
So clearly, the privacy legislation that I oversee looks at commercial activities of businesses in particular. We also have to examine non-commercial activities as well, including political parties. And these are some of the announcements that we'll be making forward in the coming weeks and months as well.
So you will be announcing before the election whether or not your government, not you specifically, but the government, whether or not political parties will be subject to different privacy laws. And I'm asking because this is, of course, something that the Privacy Commissioner has raised as an issue. That political parties are able to get away with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, if I can take a step back, if you look at the digital charter that we presented, it really reflects a whole of government approach across government. Different ministers and different departments are involved in different aspects of the charter to move forward the agenda of how do we build trust in this data and digital economy. There's some aspects that I'm responsible for that I've highlighted today in changes of the privacy legislation, the Competition Bureau looking at some of the data monopolies, also looking at Standards Council of how we collect data. So those are some of the concrete measures that I propose, but my colleagues will be talking about some of the other issues that you've raised as well.
How will what you're proposing be enforced? What kind of penalties will your government establish?
That was a key part of the changes that I talked about today. It was really about strong enforcement, so significant and meaningful penalties, maybe a percentage of revenue. And we're going to be looking at other jurisdictions as well. We're also going to be looking at how do companies even collect data or revenue. And if they do not follow the privacy laws in this country, we're going to make it difficult for them not only to collect the revenue, but collect data as well. And this sends a very clear signal that enforcement is very important, a part of the changes that we're proposing.
I understand the signal you're sending, but you obviously the details have yet to be worked out. I just want to know, for example, for someone watching right now who knows what happened with Cambridge Analytica, say the same thing happens here in the next election. What would happen to Facebook? What kind of penalties might they face?
So first of all, we already introduced changes to the regulations in PIPED, our privacy legislation. Any breach in privacy and a lack of disclosure to the individual or the privacy commissioner results in a $100,000 fine per breach. So we already introduced fines, significant fines, and in this case, the breaches were in the tens of thousands. So this, if you do the math, is fairly significant. What we're proposing
is to a company of that size, though? And I ask that with respect, right? Like, $1 billion to Facebook, is it really that much?
Well, what I'm proposing today is not only those breaches, but to add on top of that, saying a percentage of revenue. so up to 4 to 5% of revenue. So when you look at the actions we would take and other jurisdictions would take, collectively, I think that would have impact. But more importantly, it's not only the penalty itself, we're looking at the ability to collect data, the ability to generate revenue, looking at ads as well. So there's other ways to enforce, to make sure that there's strong enforcement provisions to really assist us in being very clear about the fact that privacy is absolutely essential. And if you don't follow the privacy laws in Canada, there's going to be significant penalties and meaningful penalties.
I want to ask you about another subject while I have you here. The U.S. Department of Commerce severely limited Huawei from doing business in the U.S. last week, saying that the firm was involved in activities contrary to national security. Have any officials from the U.S. government contacted your government in the course of its own review into Huawei's possible entry into the 5G network here?
Well, we're very much engaged with our American friends and partners and allies, along with our other allies across the globe as well. We're looking at other jurisdictions to see what they're doing. From our position, my colleague Ralph Goodale is examining all the security-related issues. I've also engaged with the telecommunications sector, and make no mistake, any decision we make will take those considerations into the ultimate decision we make that will benefit the security of Canadians and protect Canadians as well.
Have the Americans warned your government of any possible consequences depending on the result of that review?
Well, I think the Americans have been very clear about the positions they've taken vis-a-vis Huawei. They also recognize that Canada is a sovereign country, and we will do what's in our best interest to protect Canadians, and that's exactly how we plan to proceed. We're more than willing to engage with other countries, including the Americans as well, but we will make sure we do our due diligence, that we look at all the relevant facts and make a decision that ultimately protects Canadians.
When is that review going to be completed?
We want to take our time to do a thorough and thoughtful review, look at all the relevant facts, and not rush to judgment, but make a decision that ultimately will benefit Canadians. And that's the process that my colleague Ralph Goodale is undertaking.
Will it be released before the next election?
Well, again, there's no particular timeline that we have in place right now. We're right now in the process of engaging the private sector, different governments, and we want to make sure that it's done in the appropriate time that's required to make a thoughtful decision.
Are there any political considerations specifically for your government on the timeline, on when you release the results of that review, given what has happened since Huawei's CFO Meng Wanzhou was detained in Vancouver?
The safety and security of Canadians is the only consideration that's guiding our decision-making process. We want to make sure that any outcome that we have protects Canadians.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Minister Bains. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.